He pointed at it, remarking, "The magical trail, it goes towards the temple, and in through the front door, but it is fading weaker there." He briefly wondered if perhaps Rysandria was the cause of it, if she was the killer. She was a woman after all. Then he saw that the trail led a different way additionally. He continued, "My witch sight shows me that the trail continues strongest and thickest down the side of the building itself, past those bushes there." "Perhaps there is a side door somewhere there," suggested Rysandria. Maestro didn't want to have to follow it. However, he didn't want to be tortured by Malvanius either for a crime he did not commit. That settled it. Malvanius to him at that moment in time was far scarier than any chaos cultist could possibly be. He pressed on, following the trail like a bloodhound on a scent. The others shrugged and followed. Soon they had gone around the outside edge of the building, and still no door was to be seen, aside from the servants' entrance. But Maestro had steered the group away from even that, as the trail clearly led this other way, straight to a wall. The wizard looked a little embarrassed by this. Tobias asked, "You are sure it leads here? Truly?" Maestro responded, "Well, that or my magic is on the blink." "Don't count that option out," added Tobias, who made a note in his book. Dieter tapped his walking stave to the brickwork. It sounded solid enough. "Perhaps a secret door?" asked Maestro. "You don't say," Dieter replied, sarcasm dripping venomously as if from the fangs of a cobra. It was lost on Maestro. The wizard instead looked at the ground for possible scratch marks from where a door might open there. The ground was clear, but bending down as he had brought something else interesting to his attention. A large gap under this particular section of wall. It had to be a door, he thought. Dieter tapped another section, and this part sounded hollow instead. He nodded smugly to the others as Maestro began yanking at the gap, his fingers underneath it trying to find a suitable purchase. He strained and pulled with all his might, which was considerably less than perhaps anyone else in the group. Or that's what Tordrad thought, anyway. He considered that this weak man could probably lose an arm-wrestling competition to the holy woman here as he bent down and pushed Maestro out of the way, almost knocking him over with his sudden strength at the man's shoulder. Tordrad slotted his large, calloused fingers under the gap and stared at the section of wall above it, top to bottom for a good few moments, then removed his hands from underneath and pressed very deliberately at a certain point of the wall, about a third up from the bottom. The stone began to push inwards, and a door-shaped opening suddenly revealed itself in the wall. Tordrad considered that this door reminded him of the secret escape passages the Tsarina used in her palace back in Kislev. Tordrad pushed on the door and it began to move. Maestro helped, believing that his strength was contributing something. It certainly disturbed many of them that this door was so heavy, making Tordrad strain to push it open. Whoever frequented this secret area would have to be very strong indeed, thought Dieter. He smiled, knowing that a terrible evil must lie inside, ready to be vanquished. Perfect, he thought. Once they were inside, they turned around to a heavy, grating sound behind them. The door spring had activated, drawing it slowly towards a closed position again. Rysandria allowed fear to spill over and asked, "Do you think we should get out again?" "Too late for that," said Dieter. "What was the point in opening the thing otherwise?" Reluctantly she accepted this as the last of the outside light was snatched away. They were in total darkness now. Several group members, breathing heavily, attested to the trauma of the situation. Tobias asked, "Did any of you think to bring a lantern with you, perchance?" With a voice that was too smug this time for everyone's liking, all except Tordrad, who wasn't bothered in the slightest. No one had a lantern or torch at hand. Rysandria tried to calm her breathing, keeping it forcefully deep and even. Maestro whispered a few arcane lines of a well-rehearsed spell, and nothing happened. Then, as if strained by another presence nearby, the end of his staff gradually illuminated until there was a bright light to see by. A passage stretched on as far as the light could shine. "There we go," said Maestro. Tobias responded, "Yes, very good. First-grade college students are taught that one, Maestro. But did you notice anything strange about it?" "Well, it worked," replied the wizard. "Yes, I'm sure that might be strange to you, but anything else? Like perhaps the fact that it struggled to illuminate? There is another power here, perhaps, inside the place, where the wind of Aesir does not blow so strongly. Concentrate. What do you see ahead down this passage? Use the witch sight." Maestro concentrated with every ounce of his mind, staring into the gloom. The faint purple trail began to appear again. "Found it!" he attested in an enthusiastically loud tone. "Shh!" came the reply from everyone else. "Oh," said Maestro, a little frustrated that this one annoyance to everyone would overshadow his accomplishment of finding the trail again. Meanwhile, outside, the two witch hunters who had been following the group came together at the secret entrance. One looked at the wall grimly and commented to the other, "I will wait here to see them come out, if they come out." The other nodded quickly and spoke. "Good. I will get the captain at once. He will want to see this." The second man sprinted away and didn't find that he needed to even part the busy crowds. They recognized his uniform and parted themselves. As the group proceeded down the rough passageway, it became obvious that it was much longer than they had realized. They were also sloping down at a constant rate. Wooden plank supports were to be found all the way along both walls, looking very much like a mine shaft in some respects. An ominous dripping sound could be heard, plip-plopping constantly somewhere out of sight, perhaps through the walls in another section somewhere. The party's mood for the first time had become unanimously sombre and serious. They were silent as they quickly but quietly made their way along the passage. They had given each other worried looks when they began to hear a distant pulsing sound. Something deep and powerful rhythmically pressed a pressure into their inner ears, echoing their own frightened heartbeats that involuntarily raced to match it. With every step they took, they knew that they could be walking ever closer to their doom. "It's a door!" noticed Maestro, as quietly as he could. Tobias raised an eyebrow sarcastically. The wizard pointed his staff this way and that, and it looked like solid oak all over. Dieter pressed his ear against the surface and listened. He kept his voice low as he commented, "Whatever is causing that sound is on the other side of that door." Everyone's face was grim. The pressure coming from the pulses was irritating their ears enough to be considered painful. Dieter quite enjoyed the sensation, though. He grabbed the brass-rounded doorknob and twisted it. The door was locked. Tordrad barged forwards, becoming impatient with proceedings. He readied himself, side on, and charged the door with all of his strength. His shoulder and body impacted hard against it, but still it did not open. The centre had momentarily bent inwards under the strain of the impact, however, and the Kislevite had seen it. He charged at it a second time, this time with his axe blade positioned directly for the gap that had opened before. As his weight crushed against the mighty door, the gap presented itself again. He quickly thrust his axe into the space, partially splintering the wood in the process, but he had succeeded in creating a wedge now. The extreme edge of the blade was indeed lodged into the door's gap. He let go of the axe and it remained in place. He smiled with satisfaction and brought his foot in hard against the part of the axe that he could reach. The kick drove it a little deeper into the wood again. He kicked it once more. There was a heavy split inside the wood hidden by the door frame. He braced himself and backed up once more. With a prayer to Urson, the father of bears, he charged with all of his might, looking every bit like a bear himself at that moment in time, Maestro observed. As the Kislevite's great body thudded against the door, the lock snapped and the axe clattered noisily to the floor. It was a testament to the weight of the wood that it had not flown wide open, instead remaining ajar. Dieter reached his stave forwards and pushed the door open. Maestro raised his staff to aid in illuminating the room before them. They stared in astonishment, their faces bathed green from the glow of the strange, rough-faceted, emerald-coloured chunk of stone that sat upon a pedestal in the centre of the large room. It glowed with an eerie illumination to match the pulsing sound that came and went. "Gentlemen, and lady, Maestro began. "What you see before you is a piece of Morse slab itself. Warpstone." It didn't take him long to realise that his knowledgeable lecture meant nothing. He wasn't looking at a textbook somewhere. This was truly in front of him. Maestro had learnt well what powers Warpstone contained, and its link to the taint of chaos was famous amongst the intellectuals of society. Tobias too knew of the substance. Himself being a scholar and a scribe, he had been with the Celestial College since before Maestro was even born. It was impossible to tell how old the halfling was, but in human terms he would be considered around 40 years old.